Okay, time for the morning commute. Welcome into the channel, by the way. It's good to see you. Now, I have to admit, I made a pretty big mistake. First time in the history of building furniture, I have to remake a piece. I did it all wrong, I messed up. I'm gonna tell you all about it here in a second. I do wanna say that this video is sponsored by my good friends over at Simply Safe. Remember, there is no safe like Simply Safe. I'll tell you more about that in here in a little bit. For now, enjoy the view of the beautiful Argosy. Worked 3 years on that, so commute over, let's get to work. All right, so I made a mistake on this build. For those of you who are not aware, this is a Canon carriage. It was built for the Alamo to display one of the Canons in front of the Alamo. This was probably 2 years ago when I built this particular one. It's set outside in the elements 24/7. And so unfortunately, this degraded fast, way faster than I thought it would. The wheels have split apart. There's some rot over here at the end of this. And the wood itself is just, it has not held up well. There's a broken peg on this wedge back here that someone broke, a visitor that stood on it, broke it off. A few parts of it got stolen. So it's had a rough 2 years. Now, my mistake in this is using red oak. Red oak is not the best exterior wood. It grows mold in it really easily. It decays pretty quick. And I thought, since this was reclaimed, for one, it was hard to distinguish. My goal was to get white oak. I kind of figured out, I thought at the mill, sometimes it's really hard when you buy reclaimed oak to know if you're getting red or white. I knew there was some red in here, but I also thought there was some white. It turns out when we started working with it, it was mostly red oak, actually all red oak. And I just thought, well, since it's reclaimed, it's seen the elements, that, you know, it's held up this long, it should be fine. And the Texas sun, the Texas elements really beat it up. It lost pretty bad. I don't like having my work on display at the Alamo and having it look not good. And, you know, I think as a maker, as a craftsman, we really grow a lot and learn a lot through our mistakes. I make mistakes in this shop every day. You know, this one's a little bit embarrassing if I'm being honest with you. What we're gonna do is basically rebuild this whole thing. I've got a pile of white oak back here. I'm gonna start milling. First thing we're gonna do is disassemble this part by part, get the hardware off, get all the bolts out, which we're gonna reuse all that, and then start rebuilding all the wooden parts to this. I don't think I'm gonna salvage any of the wood in this. I think I'm just gonna redo it all. So with that being said, let's jump in and get to work on this. Okay, so while we're attempting to dismantle this Canon carriage, I wanna tell you about today's sponsor, Simply Safe. Now you're gonna wanna stay tuned. I'm going to tell you real soon about an amazing offer they have. I haven't seen one quite like this before. Now, my family is shifting into fall. We've got school started. Summer is over. We've enjoyed having Simply Safe protect our home while we're on vacation. But now, as we shift into a new routine, new schedule, get to bed way earlier now. Kids wake up calls about 5:30. Kids got to be to school around 7. So we go to bed early, and it's a peace of mind to us to know that our house is protected from theft and fire while we sleep at night. Simply Safe's award-winning home security system is designed with cutting-edge technology and powered by 24/7 professional monitoring. It's a comprehensive security system with advanced sensors and cameras to detect threats from break-ins, fires, floods, and more. The pricing is transparent and affordable, and their 24/7 monitoring plans start at less than $1 per day with no hidden fees. Now, I personally have 3 separate systems. It's kind of crazy, but I have a system in our home, I have a system here in my shop, and then I do have a system for the Argosy, my RV, which mostly is in there to protect it from water damage. I have it full of water sensors, so if anything leaks in that RV, I get a notification from Simply Safe. But the more important thing is that I have the shop and my home protected. The system is simple to set up. It comes with the base station and a keypad. From there, you can set up all of your monitoring devices. You've got glass break, you've got entry sensors, motion sensors, outdoor cameras, doorbell cameras, indoor smart cameras, smoke detectors, freeze detectors, water detectors. This is an extensive system that you can entirely install yourself. Now, my absolute favorite thing about Simply Safe is their app. I can jump on here and monitor all of my systems directly from their app. I can access the cameras. I can see who's at my house. When the camera detects motion, I get a notification on my phone, so I always know when someone's at my house, if something's getting delivered or someone is coming to the shop. I have an outdoor camera set up to monitor the shop. We also have a keypad which allows us to access our house. I can also lock the door and unlock it from this phone, and I can arm and disarm my alarm from the phone. Now, here's the great news. My viewers are getting an amazing deal this month. 50% off your home security system, a free indoor camera, and your first month free when you sign up for a core monitoring plan. All you got to do is go to simplysafe.com/Andy Rawls. You can sign up right now. The link is in the description. Not only do you get an awesome security system that I can say I've been using for 5 years and works really well, but you also help support this channel, help me put out more videos by supporting my sponsor. So a big thanks to my friends at Simply Safe. Now, let's get into building this new carriage. And remember, there's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, so we got the old carriage apart. We're essentially going to build the same carriage back. We're just instead going to use white oak now, which kind of touch base on that. So I'm working on the sides here. I've already made all the parts. I milled these out of reclaimed oak posts. Left one face rough, the old patinaed face. And then here I'm just installing kind of a tongue and groove system in the sides. This is what helps align these boards, keeps them from sliding side to side. Essentially, the whole side frames are going to be held together by 3 pieces of threaded rod, 5/8 threaded rod, and those are going to suck all these pieces down together, and then these tongues are going to help keep them lined up and in order. Now, the pieces get shorter as you get taller, so I have to stop the groove on all of them, and that's why I'm chiseling here, is where I stop the groove on the table saw, I come back and mark it off and finish it off with my chisel to get the distance I need on that groove. I come back with the router plane, great tool for leveling out that bottom, keeping it consistent with the original groove we cut on the table saw, and we'll just kind of clean this up and get the edges nice and straight. So once we get these two sides kind of set up, before we can assemble, we need to cut half laps in the bottom rail. So this will accept the 2 axles that hold the wheels, obviously. And so we're going to do this just pretty much quick and easy on the table saw. First here I'm setting my height of cut, about 1.5 inches deep. We got 3-inch by 3-inch axles, so we're going to go halfway through that material. I set a stop. I go do all the cuts with that stop, and then I'm going to move my stop over and do the other. Basically, I'm cutting the walls using the stop of this half lap on all the parts, and then I'm going to go lazy man style here. And you know, we're all guilty. Just one at a time, hack away at this and clear out the waste. If you're not lazy, you put on a dado stack, which honestly I don't know if that's fast or not, but if you got a 3/4 to 1 inch dado stack, you're going to clear waste a lot quicker. Here's a rare shot of me working without a hat and in shorts. This is very likely a Sunday evening, nighttime session here, and yeah, I got a little bald spot up there. I guess that's life. That's what happens when you get old. It's also what happens when you own a business and you have to operate it, and it's freaking stressful. But that's all right. I still love what I do. So working through these, making sure everything fits. Now that I got those half laps cut on the bottom, we can probably work our way towards the final glue up. We got one more thing to do here, actually. We're going to cut out the cutout on the top piece for the Canon trunnions. Now, if you're not familiar with what a trunnion is, it is a cylindrical protrusion used as a mounting or pivoting point. So that's basically how we're going to mount this Canon onto the carriage. It's a very important part here. I'm going to rough cut it out here on my old Oliver. The saw was made in 1926. And she's beautiful and she cuts great. And I got a small little blade on here so we can cut this tight curve. I don't remember what the diameter of this is. When I built this carriage originally 2.5 years ago, I ordered a matching Forstner bit to drill these out. So you can see there I've drilled out a template at in the 3/8 plywood, and I'm using that with a bearing bit, and I'm just going to kind of go through the process. We're going to start with the little guy here, the little palm router. First we make a cut with the bearing riding on that cutout, that plywood, and then we can take the plywood off and start dropping the bit down as quick as we can, get through and cut as deep as we can with the little guy. So once we get there, we pull out the big guy, not to be confused with Joe Biden, and we make deeper cuts with a bigger bit. Not going to be able to get all the way through this piece here. We're going to have to go, well, leave about 1 inch and then change bits, flip it, and run a bottom bearing to finish it off. So quite a few steps in making this cutout, and I think these parts are 3.5 inches. I'm going to get one more. Nope, that's it. So here we are. We've magically flipped it. Can't see it. Well, you can kind of see it there. That bearing is riding on what we were cutting previously and matching that and getting that last bit of waste. Good job, big guy. All right, so this is a new step that I'm thinking and hopeful is going to have an impact on the longevity of this. This is called Boracare. This is I don't really know how to describe it, kind of like an insecticide for boring insects on wood and for fungus and decay. It's very sticky and gelatiny, as you can kind of tell as I pour it. I actually use this stuff when I saw logs and I cut pecan or whatever. I'll spray down those boards right off when I get done cutting them with Boracare to prevent borers from getting in the woods as they dry. I got a lot of wood in my shipping container outside the shop. It's all been treated with Boracare. So this is a great product. It's not cheap. You can get it on Amazon. Mix it up 1-to-1 there in the pump sprayer, and then I just basically douse every single part of this Canon carriage. It'll it's obviously going to add a lot of moisture to the parts. Not a big deal there, but it is, once it dries, going to kind of leave almost like a sticky residue on the wood. Haven't found that to be an issue with finishing or anything like that. This stuff is designed to penetrate into the cellulose and the fibers of the wood and really create a great protection against borers. I used it on my deck when I built my deck. When we remodeled our house, we sprayed about 4 feet up on all the exposed 2x4s in the wall. Keep termites out, because termites are a real big problem here in the hill country. So great product. Hopefully this is going to help. Now while that dries, I'll leave those out in the hot Texas sun. We're going to go to the lathe and work on these axles. So this is basically returning the axle here for the wheel. I've got some new, what do you call these? I'm drawing a blank in my brain. I have an old man moment here. Dividers, calipers, what are we going to call it? Not dividers, but they're used to scale the size. Those are some new ones, and I need to work on them, because when you get there to that point they grab, and then they don't stay. So I didn't really like those. I'm going to go back to my old ones. Basically, I scaled it down using those, and now I'm going to take my gouge and kind of level it all out. You can see the old axles there, pretty darn rough shape. That red oak, I remember when we delivered that carriage, not long after I went and checked it out, it was already turning kind of a mildewy dark all around. It's just, the red oak does not hold up well. Good fit there on the wheel. Don't want these to be super tight, obviously, because this is wood, and wood expands when it gets wet, and so we don't want the wheels to get stuck. Okay, so all the parts have dried. I let them bake out in the sun, so we can go ahead and assemble this. There's no glue in this assembly. Basically just hammer it all together and run those threaded rods through and cinch it all tight. The threaded rods are left over from the old carriage. I reused all that hardware. It was all bought from Old West Iron, and it's held up really well. I bought it with the finish on it. I think they painted it or maybe powder coated, I'm not sure. There's some rust on these parts, but for the most part, the bolts, the square nuts and washers have really held up much better than the red oak, I can tell you that. Make sure when you hammer threaded rod into something, you're not using a metal hammer straight onto the threads, or you're just going to destroy them. I like to put the nut on and leave it a little bit proud of the threaded rod and then hammer it with this older mallet, assembly mallet. Alright, so once we get that in there, we crank it down, get it all pulled together. This is a really solid connection. Everything's pretty dang strong at this point. Alright, so we're going to dry fit the two sides together. All the guts to this, I didn't really show in the video how I made all those. There are 2 videos of the first carriage made way back a couple years ago. I'll link those. You can go check those out if you really want to get in depth. You can tell there we got some dominoes. We pulled out the Festool, which might anger a few people, but it worked really well. What I'm doing here is I'm laying out for the threaded rod to go through. So there's 3 threaded rods to go through the sides and pull it all together. Kind of sandwich everything together. What I got to do though is I got to locate those holes, locate them properly, and hit the center of each support. There's 3 of those to do, so this took a little bit of focus to get it right, and I actually got one hole just about missed it completely. I was really close to the edge of the board, just barely made it work. Once we get these drilled through, we can disassemble it, and then we're going to go over to the lathe and bore out through I think it's around 9 inches through those boards. Pretty long hole to drill. Ooh, I was a little off center there. Dang. So I'm noticing here that, shoot, I'm a little bit off. I almost really messed that up. So I got the 5/8 brad point chucked up into the lathe. We're going to take our time here and crank it down. I got the speed a little high here. I need to slow that down. Got some burning happening. Didn't slow it down enough, I don't think, because we're still burning. But so we get about as deep as we can. Here so I'm backing my tailstock. So I've got about 4 inches of travel. I'm going to back all that out, slide the tailstock over, lock it into the center line. This is the other hole, so I'm doing both sides. I'm doing the first side, and then I'm going to flip it. You can tell by how this one's going that it's way off center. This is the one that I got off center, and you can see the hole there, almost coming out the top of that board. So could have done better. So now the great thing about these step centers that I have on my lathe is you can actually go into the hole with that one and come back and bore. And we're gonna have just enough bit here to meet in the middle and make this hole go clear through that board. You could probably set up a drill press to do this too. It would take a little bit longer. The lathe works pretty good. All right, we're gonna do the glue up. So we are gluing some of this. I'm only gluing the center dominoes on these. I'm not going to glue the outside, and everything's loose, so these can have some movement. They can swell and shrink because it's obviously going to be outside. I'm using Titebond 3 on all my glue ups in here. Interesting thing is when I disassembled the old carriage, there were some areas where I used epoxy to glue up, specifically on the wheels, and that epoxy failed. And a lot of areas where I glued up with Titebond, and it was still, the glue connections were solid, which honestly surprised me because I've always known Titebond 3 to be waterproof, but I didn't realize it was like covered in rain, soaking wet waterproof. It did pretty good. All right, we get it together. Now we got to get all this rod in. So we need a little clamp there to help us out. The axles are actually going to become a pretty important part of the structure as well. But these three pieces of threaded rod are what really hold this together. The only downside to this design is they will, if it shrinks in the hot Texas sun, it will loosen those nuts. So you've got to kind of maintain the carriage, check on it, you know, every so often to tighten those nuts down if things are shrinking. Okay, this is a little bit of a different setup. This is a platform basically where the base ring of the Canon is going to sit. Now there's a wedge that goes on this platform, and that wedge, as you push it in, changes the angle of attack, or however you want to term it, on the Canon. So it changes your shot, basically, the length of your shot. I'm going to use these little strips here. This is a deviation from the previous carriage. The reason for that is because the hole that I drilled was too close to the top of this board, and if I ran a groove in this board, I would have hit my steel rod. So we had to build up. So we're putting these two strips in. I've opted to use some old cut nails. I say old cut nails, they're modern day cut nails, but they mimic the old style nails. We don't want to put any hardware in this carriage that's gonna be modern day. I want it to look like it was built back in the 1800s. So when we do cut nails, it's a good idea to pre-drill the holes, especially when you're in close to the edge of a board on the end there, because cut nails, if you don't do them properly, and especially in woods like oak, they'll split the wood pretty quick. They're like giant steel wedges in a sense. So here's a look at them going. It's pretty satisfying nailing these in. They really grab on tight, and they cinch down on those boards. And I did glue the center of this. I've got a cross grain situation here, so that board we're hammering to, grain's going one way, the other board the grain's going the opposite, so we can't glue across the whole thing, because that would they would be fighting each other. So we just glued in the middle. The nails are capable of kind of working with wood movement. So the nails don't worry me, but glue would worry me. Glue would eventually cause failure. Okay, so here's a look at our wedge. I was talking about earlier. This just a few hits with a hand plane here to fit this. I want to keep things, you know, this isn't furniture that goes indoors, so I don't want my tolerances to be overly tight here. I want to make sure that it's got a little slop in it and a little bit of play, which is hard for me to do. It's hard for me to do because I'm the furniture maker and I want everything to slide perfectly and fit really well. But if I did it that way, the first storm or humidity that hit it, that thing would just swell up and never move. And I've made that mistake many a times. You can ask the guys at the Alamo. All right, so we're going to glue on the axles. Like I said, these are an important component to the frame. They hold that half lap is really critical. It holds the bottom of that carriage in place, keeps it from pushing it out. It also keeps those axles firmly planted on this carriage frame. As you're rolling this thing around with a heavy Canon on it, you don't want an axle just popping off. So we bury it down in these half laps, pretty tight fit here. You can see I'm really beating it together, and we've got glue as well, so it's strong. And on top of that, we're gonna throw some giant lags in the front axle, and the back axle is going to get the threaded rod all the way through. So it's really strong. All right, I think I can stop hitting it now. So these are 5/8 lags by like 4 or 5 inches long. Again, these came from Old West Iron. Really awkward motion here. I guess it's the clamp there in my way, but it takes some force to move these lags. I did put a lot of wax on them to kind of lubricate them a little bit. Obviously pre-drilled the holes. We didn't just go right into oak. Even then, it takes a little bit of work to get those locked down. Drilling out through the axle here, so we already had the holes in the frame there. We just got to clear it through the axle, and then we can send our threaded rod through and tighten it all down. These threads are a little long here, so I don't show it in the video, but I'm going to come back and cut those off, shorten them up. Obviously, we don't want them sticking up like that. That would be a hazard. All right, so now we get to oil. This is Q-Tech Extreme Oil. I put some color in it. It's got a little walnut coloring. You can add color to this oil. This is the oil I used for my deck. It's worked great. So on top of having multiple coats of Boracare on every part of this carriage, we're now going to put 2 coats of oil. This stuff it takes a while to cure, so basically we foam brush it on pretty heavy, wipe it down real good. You can see it's darkening up that oak a little bit, which I think that looks nice. And then we got to let it sit out in the Texas sun and bake for a while to really kind of dry it out, and I'll put on a second coat, and then this thing's pretty much ready to go. So a couple things. First, the Patreon has a little bit more in-depth coverage of the wheels. I ended up reusing the old wheels. I know we said we weren't going to use any of the red oak. The old wheels were red oak. I talk more about why I did that in Patreon. It is a part of those wheels actually held up pretty good for one, and it is a part of the carriage that can be removed and replaced. I didn't have good material on hand to rebuild those wheels, so we opted to reuse the old ones. So here we are. We put it out in front of the shop. I'm gonna get a beautiful Texas sunset on it here in the evening and let it all dry out, and tomorrow we will install wheels and hardware. So that is going to wrap it up for this video. I just want to give a huge thanks to the Alamo, to the guys there that kind of run the show, who I coordinate with. They have been very patient with me, and they are always super kind and thankful for the work I do, even when I don't quite do it well. So like I said, I just don't want my work on display if I feel like it's not very good. And the other carriage was looking really rough, and last time I went out there and saw it, I was a little bummed, and it just has gotten worse since. So for me, I warranty all my furniture for a lifetime guarantee. Obviously, outdoor furniture, I can't do that because the elements are going to win always, but it should last more than 2 to 3 years. And in this case, we just had a bad selection of wood species. You got to stand behind your work, and so I decided to rebuild this for them without them paying for any of the cost of the shop time, which I think is fair. I hope you guys enjoyed the build. I hope you learned something. My mistakes can teach you something. I'm not afraid to admit when I make a mistake, and that's where we're at. This thing came out great. I think it looks nice. It's got good action on the roll here. We got the wheels on. Like I said, I reused the original wheels. I'm going to talk about that in depth over on my Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel in that way, I would really appreciate it. There's some great behind the scenes content, some teaching content. I just think some stuff up there that could be really, really beneficial to people if they want to help support the channel. So that's it. Like I said, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and it's time to get back to making furniture. We'll see you next time.